Hi, Lisa. I just want to welcome you to Ministry with Coffee. I'm so glad that you're joining us today. You know that I sent you a list of questions of what we're going to be talking about, and so that our listeners can hear your incredible story. So I'm going to start now with the first question, and then I'm going to let you share. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, great. So how did you feel and how did you react when you first had your diagnosis that you had cancer?
What's crazy, it's coming up on 10 years since I was diagnosed. And I'll just kind of give you a little bit. I had kind of put off going to the doctor. It just happens. I'd been looking for a new doctor, and it was just one of those things that I just didn't feel like I just put off time, right? And I had a friend at work who knew that I had it was an abnormal pap, like it had an abnormal result, and but it was nothing at that time. But she was like, "You probably need to get back in. You need to get back in." And through her pushing, um, went back and was just doing like regular testing. And I remember I was traveling at the time, got a phone call. I was in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, poor reception. And it was just that, hey, we need you to come back in and do additional testing. And I'm thinking, no big deal. I've had that happen before. It's, whatever, sure, get it on the books. And literally it was almost in a couple of weeks, it'll be ten years to the day that I got that call. The testing for me was not, didn't end up being comfortable. And so kind of went through that. It was just unique. It was different. And then it was a couple of weeks after that, my doctor called, and I remember I was at work and worked in a cubicle environment. And if you work in a cubicle environment, there's no privacy. And so we had this like large storage closet that's where our office we went to. And so as soon as she called, she's like, "Do you have a place you can talk?" And I'm like, "Sure." So I go in there, and immediately when she was like, she goes, "Okay, your results came back." And she's like, "I'm sorry to share with you, but you've been diagnosed with cervical cancer," and just starts using a lot of big words, right? And the only word that stands out is cancer. And you hear that word, and it's just, there's never really anything positive around that. So it was just trying to digest what that meant, what that looked like. And she was like, "Well, it's early stages, the good part, and she used a lot of other big words. And then it was just like, "But it's contained. That's the good news, but I'm going to have to refer you on to an oncologist," just kind of going through that. But all these thoughts are running through my head of what that really meant, and still not really knowing what it meant in that time, like what that journey would look like. And I'm at work, so I'm then calling my husband, and he's just like, he kind of freaked out in his own sense, in a way, like, what does this mean? And knowing there's nothing he can do to fix it. And so we just kind of started on this journey. I had already been on a journey of wanting to get pregnant and hadn't been able to. And for this, they were recommending a hysterectomy, which then would definitely eliminate the chances of getting pregnant. And that became part of the harder struggle, is facing that than facing I mean, there's both, right? There was just both of them coming at you, trying to understand the cancer piece, trying to understand, trying to see, even when we met with the oncologist, he didn't have the best bedside manner. And when he was basically like, because I was it was
How old were you,
I was
Lisa?
39. So it's at that age where all of a sudden it was just like, even getting pregnant was, the years were shorter and shorter of that being able to happen. And it was just kind of one of those things. And he's like, "Well, basically, if you haven't gotten pregnant yet, you're not going to," was his words. And I'm like, "Okay, well, that's not great to hear. That's not comforting." And then he was just like, "Right now, the cancer is contained." He's like, "This is the best option for treatment to get it all out." He's like, "There's other options, but there's no guarantees." And my husband's just like, "Get it out, get it out." And, and I was with him. I agreed. It was just a lot to digest of what that decision ultimately meant. So it was definitely really hard in those moments, in those initial times, of just recognizing that, but also knowing the right thing for my health was to get it out. So
So you heard this word, and that's a huge challenge right there, knowing that maybe I'm never going to be able to carry a child of my own. What are some other challenges that you faced during that big, I mean, those are big enough. I mean, let's
right.
just face it, those are big enough. But was there any more big challenges that you felt like you faced during this journey?
For women, I would say, for most women, not all women, but I think for most women, there is this deep almost need, to, and I think it's something that we've been designed for is,
Exactly.
is to be a mother. And so, and what that looks like. And so I think there was just coming to terms with that, is this need to nurture. And then, it's just this being taken away. So the challenge, a lot of it was asking God, like, why, when you've designed us for this, and then now I'm not going to be able to. So it was kind of in this place of really trying to figure out then what is my purpose. What we've been told since we were little, right? It's
Yeah.
like, you're
Hmm.
going to find this Prince Charming, you're going to get married, you're going to have kids, you're going to have all these different things. And this is kind of
And we
laid
watched
out.
Cinderella, right? We watched
Right.
it.
Right. So you kind of have this and you think, and then, it's just for us. And we got, married a little bit. I mean, I was like in my late 20s when we got married, and then we moved. And so I knew like kids for us were going to be right away. And then just kind of life happens. But then it's just, okay, I'm inching towards 40 going,
Mhm.
this still hasn't happened. And so just praying, and I really had been in a season of just praying, God, like, just really would wanting kids. And so when that happened, it was just this huge letdown of what what that looked like. And then this huge question of then, well, then what do you have for me? And I just remember like I
And it sounds
shifted.
like you, though, went to God. So did you, I mean, so that was one of my questions I was going to ask you today is like, who did you turn to? Where
and
did you go?
and
I
yeah, and
mean,
it
that's
was
just
so
so hard.
it's so hard. And so I mean, I was raised in a Christian home. I was raised, knowing God from a young age. But I would say that my walk with Him, um, I mean, I've had a walk with Him all this time, but I would say that it really deepened. It was new. It was deepened, and I had kind of really started coming back to church and started getting involved in groups probably a couple of years before this happened, and God started aligning people in my path around that, which is just so beautiful how He had already started to create a network of friends and a tribe to be around me and walk beside me with this. And so, but I would say it was first and foremost God that got me through. And it was, say, first, after the diagnosis, I mean, you have the pity party, right? You have to address it. You have to,
Mhm.
but then it was like, okay, God, like it went from like, why me is this happening to me? Like, why me is this happening? Like, what is your will for me through this? And getting to a place still trying to figure out how to grieve. And I don't think I knew
Mhm.
that word back then that I could apply it to that situation. I always thought
Right.
grief really was more of a physical, you had to have somebody physical in your life to lose. And I just remember one time walking with a pastor friend of mine going, could I grieve something that I never actually had?
Oh, that's a
And
good
she
word,
was
Lisa.
and she was like, yes. And it gave me such permission in that time because we had another friend who had, I mean, she lost some like physical loss. And you compare these things and it's like you can't compare grief. Like you can't compare.
Mhm.
But she was like, yes. And it gave me permission at that time to grieve essentially the loss of a dream, the loss of what I thought things would look like, the loss of, and walking
Well, the
that out.
loss of
And
children, the children
yeah,
that you didn't get to have.
didn't right. And so and I think that was the biggest piece because I think sometimes we deny ourselves that
Right.
permission because we compare our circumstance to somebody else, and if you deny yourself that, then you're not really facing the truth of it and you're just kind of candy coating over it, and it's like you have to be able to address that loss. And so I think having that, just allowed me further, and it was further along. I mean, my body had already started to heal when I was already on that journey with talking to her. So I just feel like the healing doesn't happen overnight. It just kind of happens in stages. And so first, it's like was walking through, my body was healing, after the hysterectomy, but it was really more my heart walking through of just stepping into like, God, if if this is not going to be the plan you have for me, then what does that look like? And I just remember one time I was in the car. I think I was on my way to church, like to probably I'd been, in with women's groups, and I just said, you gave me the need to nurture. You need to give me something to nurture. And I think those are what I call the dangerous prayers because he's like, oh, you
Mhm.
asked for it now. And that's when I really started getting more involved in our women's ministry at our church, and just started leading there and just and recognizing that I mean I've always had a heart for women, but really stepping into what that looked like and what it meant to pour into others and so that was part of the journey. And then also I got involved around that time after was a ministry called I Am Freedom Girl, which I think I mentioned. It's a ministry that goes into actually strip clubs, into the strip club
Uh-huh.
industry, and we minister to women
Wow.
in the strip clubs. And something I never have imagined God sending me. And when He kept placing that on my heart, I'm like, "Are you sure? Like, are you sure?" I'm like, I had never been in
Uh,
one of those
yeah.
establishments before. I'm like, how are you going to use me for this? And but it's just been so unique. And he's just shown me along the way of I had a different capacity level because I didn't have kids, that I was able to step in and do other things. And
Right.
so that has helped because I think deep down we all have this need to know that there's purpose in our life, right? That we're not just
Absolutely.
here for some blank reason, but that we have been designed. And so I think when God steps in and shows us how he can use us and we surrender to that, I think there's just such beauty in that piece. But
I really like that because you're nurturing like a spiritual mother to those young girls that are maybe in a strip club that have not been nurtured. Maybe that's why they're there. It's
right.
because they don't know the father. They haven't had that relationship with him. They don't understand a father who loves them and how much he loves them and just to really to value who they are so that they
Mhm.
could choose a different way of life. So I
Yeah,
think that's a wonderful thing that he showed you because it sounds like, you had that wilderness time.
yeah,
And this is that wilderness where he's revealing some things that he's wanting you to do.
yeah.
So,
And it was, and there was just a a new depth, I think, to my relationship with walking with him. And I think that happens right in the wilderness is this complete dependency on God to get us through that. And I honestly, like I was just talking with another friend, like I don't know what people do that don't have God in their life, because I just can't imagine what the journey would look like without him.
how did your husband react to that loss? I mean, did he grieve with you? I mean,
He, I think, was more of just, and I didn't really recognize. I mean, like he kind of held a lot in during that time.
right.
He was such a strong like pillar during that time.
Mhm.
When it comes to medical knowledge and being able to walk through that, he's worked in the medical industry. He could take it with I don't know. There's just such a different, like he just was able to take things, handle things. He could talk to doctors in a different way, ask questions in a different way. That was just that strength that I needed from that aspect.
That's
Um,
good.
um, from just the loss, I don't think that he grieved the way I did, because what I learned later that he shared with me was that his biggest concern was losing me. And
Yeah.
so that part I never fully recognized because he would just step in and do things and help and I saw him like, for one of the first times more into this caretaker role, like especially as I was healing after the surgery and stuff, and just in a whole different way, and I think from that it was unique. And then just, I just remember when he revealed, because we had a health scare about, it was like 11 days after my surgery where I just started bleeding again. And it just became, and it just was a scare. And for him, like, just when we rushed to the ER and it was just a variety of things that he told me later. He's like, I thought I was losing you. And that was his biggest, concern. So I really learned that a lot of decisions that he made during that time was all about making sure that
That's true.
was about me.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good, Lisa. So I can tell that you're doing a lot of ministry and that's kind of the way that you're giving back. How did that situation really help you step into ministry even more? I mean, I think it probably changed you in a lot of different ways. So how did that change affect how you ministered to other women?
I think for a long time I hadn't been involved and I'd been trying to figure out where my place was and where God was calling me. And I remember in my gosh, it was I think it was like early 20s. I'd gone to this retreat, our hometown church growing up, and I remember being prophesied over a prophecy that to work with women, and I always thought it was going to be these young teenage girls. And so then I remember probably about a year maybe or so before this, showing up at the youth ministry, and I just got overwhelmed, and I'm like, okay, this is not it. Like this, or just, and I think it was timing too. I mean, I think it'd be a lot different now, but it was just timing, just being like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And but walking through this, there was just, I think, a greater thing on my heart because I'd already started getting involved in women's ministries just by showing up, right? Just by joining a small group and recognizing just the place that women are in, right? We need community. We need to be surrounded by people that are going to encourage us, support us, and that are continually pointing us back to Jesus. I mean, and that has become, one of the things is, as I would be coaching some of my leaders, is that I've learned because there's sometimes a pressure that everybody has to be friends. And I'm like, no, you're there to point them toward Jesus, and the friendship, everything else will organically come about. But it's like first and foremost. And I think though there is this thing inside of us though, with women is just finding this place that we belong, finding purpose, and then really true friends. And so my heart just began to grow in women's ministry and helping people um, just really develop that relationship with God and to understand really what calling is. And I think that's one thing we've been talking about, and people get it so I think misconstrued, thinking they need this huge platform, or if it's not like this big thing or whatever. And I'm like, man, it's daily. Like it's, I mean, more and more reminded of like it's when you're at the supermarket, it's how you just treat somebody in passing. It's just this daily walk that we are called to just be the light of Jesus. And then, like God will start to pull out our giftings and say, okay, over here, this is where you excel. I'm going to use you. But, I think sometimes it's just start serving someplace, but and start
Absolutely.
anywhere and God will fine tune that.
Um, what would you say to a young girl that is just received the same diagnosis that you received when you were 39? What would you say to her to bring her hope and encouragement just so that she knows that she's not alone?
I think first learning to choose hope. Like I think we get into sometimes, in our circumstance and are so surrounded by it that we just have all this hopelessness. That first I think we really have to redirect our gaze to actually choose hope and understand who God is, that he has the best for us, right? And so even though we don't see it, that his best plan. So as you're sitting in this place of what's normally uncertainty is, of really first choosing hope. And then I think it's, for me, it was really surrendering to the plan. I think it's recognizing where you're at. I mean, if you just received a diagnosis, recognize that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to have all the feels. Um, but then it's like, find something that can give you hope to get through, find something that you can trust that God really does have the best plans for us. It just may not be, how we see it. And I think, we can um, step into that, but to me, it's a process though. It's a process of allowing yourself to go through the grief, allowing yourself to go through the feels, and um, and then find good people who will keep encouraging you, who will keep pouring into you, will pray over you. Find those prayer partners that you can have on speed dial. Honest to goodness, like you have to have those folks as well.
We can't keep what we're not willing to give away, right?
Mm,
We need to be able to give away what God has given us. I mean, I think in
yes.
the storms that we all have, those storms are for a purpose and a reason, and He allows us to go through that because He can trust us.
Yeah.
He can trust us with that storm. He
Mm,
knows that we are planted firmly in solid ground, that we will do what He's asked us to do. And by doing that, we're able to give it away. And we're able to say, hey, there is hope. You will get to the other side. You will get to the promised land. It might be a different promise than what we thought or,
mm,
or what we were hoping for, but nevertheless, it's amazing because
Hmm.
it's what God wants. And so when we are walking in his grace and his perfect plan for us, even though it doesn't always match ours, there's always good, right?
Hmm.
So I'm so glad you shared that because it's, I mean, you're pouring back into women. You're showing them compassion and mercy after what you've been through. Some would have turned away from God. And I'm so proud of you for not doing that. I'm so glad. And I'm so glad that you shared with the listeners. Don't turn away. Press into him
Hmm.
because he has something great for you.
Hmm.
So I just want to thank you for coming on the show today and for allowing us to hear your story. I think it's going to bless many women and very relatable. And I think I just can't wait to share you.